We are happy to be hosting you. We are happy to have you on the platform. Thank you for joining us. I hope the session is going to be fruitful and is going to be beneficial for everyone of us on the platform. We are going to start with our program. Can we please project our program? It's going to be a very fruitful engagement. Katu, are you there?
Yes, I will do it just now.
All right, thank you. My name is Nomantande Yeki, and it is going to, all right. A lot of colleagues are joining the platform. My name is Nomantande Yeki, and I will be the program director for today, and it is my pleasure to do so. So I see we've got about 55 people currently online. Would you kindly on the chat bar just write your name and your surname and which organization you represent? Yes, let's do that. Katu, are you working on projecting the program?
Yes.
All right. Right. Before we get into the program, let's then do some house rules. The session is recorded and the recording will be availed to all of us. And the slot, there is going to be a slot for discussions and for presentation. Kindly keep yourselves all mute unless you have been given a platform to speak. Thank you for the introductions, colleagues. And also kindly note that on the chat bar, you are most welcome to drop any questions, any comments during the presentation. And also a copy of all the presentations will be sent to all participants. And also I urge that all our speakers to stick to the allocated time. Thank you again, colleagues, for the introductions. And without wasting any time, Mr. Elvis Nakane is going to give us opening remarks and tell us why we are here and give us a road ahead for this engagement. Mr. Nakane, are you there?
Yes, I am here. If you can confirm that you can indeed hear me.
Yes, we can hear you. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Madam Director. For directing the program today. Indeed, my name is Elvis Nagana. Let me start off by greeting everyone, including representatives from the South African Union of Food Markets, UFM, representatives from the Institute for Market Agents of South Africa, IMASA, representatives from the Council for Black Market Agents, the CBMA, representatives from the regulator, the Agricultural Produce Agents Council, the APEC, representatives from Food South Africa, representatives from our mother department, the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development, as well as other government departments, representatives from the NAMC, the National Agricultural Marketing Council, as well as other sister state-owned entities, and most importantly, representatives from our farmer organizations, as well as our farmers themselves that are present here today. We are indeed greatly privileged to have you amongst us. It is with a great sense of honor and privilege for the NAMC to be hosting you during this very important fresh produce market information day. Each quarter, the NAMC, together with our other partners such as the department and industry organizations, host these market information days with the objective of providing a platform for information sharing on a variety of key and contemporary issues that affect the various industries within the agricultural sector in South Africa. be it horticulture, the livestock field crops, or indeed agro-processing. This quarter, we meet at a time when our erstwhile statistical agency, Statistics South Africa, had just released gross domestic product or GDP figures for the first quarter of 2023, which showed that the GDP increased by 0.4% during the quarter under review, with the country avoiding a technical recession. However, the agriculture, forestry, and fishery industry decreased by 12.3% in the quarter under review, contributing a negative 0.4 of a percentage point to GDP growth. And this, of course, as was indicated by Statistics South Africa, was primarily due to the decreased economic activities reported for field crops as well as animal products. During the same period, net exports contributed a negative 0.2 of a percentage point to total GDP, following increases of 4.1% in exports and 4.4% in imports. What is interesting from the net trade figures is that the 4.1% increase in exports during the quarter under review was largely influenced by increased trade in base metals, vegetable products, prepared foodstuffs, beverages and tobacco, and machinery and electrical equipment. While on the other side, the 4.4% increase in imports was also largely influenced by increased trade in machinery and equipment, chemical products, vehicles and transport equipment, and guess what? Again, prepared foodstuffs, beverages, and tobacco. From this analysis, one is quickly or immediately reminded of the sixth pillar of the Agriculture and Agro-Processing Master Plan, the NAMC, which specifically talks to improving localized food production, reducing imports, and expanding agro-processing exports. This, when implemented appropriately, is likely to lead to a positive contribution to the net exports of the country. And of course, colleagues would be reminded that the NAMC, the Agriculture and Agro-Processing Master Plan, is the blueprint initiated by the government in close collaboration with key social partners as a social compacting tool to address the structural constraints that inhibit inclusive growth within this beautiful agricultural sector of ours. And of course, the vision of the Agriculture and Agro-Processing Master Plan is to build an agriculture and agro-processing sector that is inclusive, sustainable, competitive, growing, and most importantly, job creating. The horticultural industry, which includes fresh produce, our focus here today, is a significant contributor to the total gross value of agricultural production, and only comes second year in and year out to annual production, with the horticultural industry contributing in excess of 106 billion during the 2020-2021 production year. And colleagues, fresh produce markets continue to play a significant role in the distribution and marketing of fresh produce in South Africa. They also play a key price discovery role within the fresh produce marketing system in the country. And furthermore, they also serve as a convenient and reliable market access point for especially our emerging producers as well as traders, both formal and informal. We have here with us today relevant speakers who will expand more on these very important issues during our program today. And I do not wish to steal their thunder at this point. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, the NAMC is pleased that you managed to steal some of your time from your busy schedules so that you are here with us today as we engage in this information sharing session on fresh produce. And lastly, the NAMC wishes to express that the views that will be presented by the various speakers here today are those of the speakers and do not in any way or by any stretch of the imagination represent or purport to represent the views of the NAMC. We hope that we are all going to have a good and fruitful information day and wish all the speakers and contributors well in their presentations today. Thank you very much, Program Director.
Thank you, Mr. Nakane, for those remarks that covered the state of agriculture, its contribution to the GDP, and also particularly focusing on horticulture and also covering a bit of policy there. Thank you, sir, for giving us those remarks. So without wasting any time, we're going to go ahead with our program, and we are going to have our very first presenter, Ms. Thando Mpolu, who is going to give us an overview of the fresh produce market value chain. And thereafter, we are going to open the floor for discussions, for questions, for comments, and any reactions to the presentation. Are you there, ma'am? Are you ready? And thank you, colleagues. I see the introductions on the chat bar. It looks like we have a very good representation of all the stakeholders. Thank you so much for making time for this session. Katu, can you please confirm if our speaker is online?
Not yet, Norma. Let me.
The speaker is not yet online. Do we have the following speaker? It would have been nice, though, to start with the value chain. Do we have the following speaker? Is it my network, colleagues? Hello?
No, we are still here with you, Program Director.
All right. Is the following speaker there? The following speaker is from IMASA. Is the speaker online? Yes, the session is recorded. Can the colleagues from MEC assist? All right, in the meantime, can we have brief introductions from all our speakers who are on the program? If you are okay with switching on your camera, you can do so. Can we have short introductions from our speakers who are on the program?
Good morning, colleagues. Can you hear me, Chair?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right. No, apologies for the camera. I'm not going to be able to. I'm currently at the airport and I'm overdressed for the occasion. My name is Thabile Nkunjana. I am an agricultural economist within the NMC under a Market and Economic Research Center within the Union of Agri-Food Chains. And thanks for having me, Chair School.
Thank you, Mr. Nkunjana. I see we have other speakers.
Shall I come in here very quickly? My name is Gwen Foster. My focus is market access, in particular from smallholder farmers, rural areas, community groups, and so on, through to the progression of exports. the barriers to getting into even local markets are growing the whole time. For instance, the new draft regulations that are issued for identifying products. So this is a very, very valuable session. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, and we look forward to your presentation. To our next speaker.
Yes, good morning, everybody. My name is Frans van Hals. I'm the registrar of APAC. APAC is the Agricultural Produce Agents Council, regulator in our beautiful industry. We regulate 3 areas in South Africa, all fresh produce agents working at your traditional fresh produce markets, export agents, and then, of course, livestock agents. Absolute privilege to be here and looking forward to a positive engagement. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to also have you. The next speaker.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Pumulani Rachitanga. I'm the CEO of Fruit South Africa. We are an umbrella body of the different fruit industry associations in South Africa, but I'll share more in my presentation later. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. We look forward to that presentation. Katu, do we have? Okay, I see Miss Mbulu is only logging in now. Let's keep the program projected, please. Ms. Tando Mbulu, can you confirm if you can hear us?
Yes, I'm actually missed it.
Okay, all right. My apologies for that. We are happy to have you on the platform and welcome. And we were waiting for your presentation. Without wasting any time, can you please take us through your presentation?
Thank you very much, ma'am. My apologies for arriving late. I'm actually juggling between 3 meetings this morning. Just as a way of introduction, my name is Tando. My surname is Mbulu. I am the convener of the South African Union Food Markets. I just wanted to make some few concepts around what the fresh produce market is all about. First of all, I think it's important that we need to start and frame it from a legal point of view as to what gives us the right as markets to be able to work as fresh produce markets. I want to draw your attention to the constitutionality element of it. For example, if you're looking at the constitution of the country in Chapter 5, Section 83(1) of the Local Government Municipal Structure Act, that's where we derive our mandate as fresh produce market. In fact, it puts more authority and power on the local sphere to be the ones that are actually driving the fresh produce market. That is why you would then find out it is difficult for national government at times to do an intervention because they are actually more restricted by the legal framework, because the fresh produce market becomes in the purview of local government. So that's one element I want to raise, because it's very important as we discuss this matter, we understand the legal framework of the fresh produce market. I think of great importance, again, I want to draw your attention to a case study of Tshwane, just to amplify the point that I've just made, that Agri-SA and IMASA have taken fresh produce markets of Tshwane into court. And if you listen to what they are raising, and I want to quote what they have said, if you allow me, Chairperson, let me read and quote what they have said. South Africa's markets play a critical role in guaranteeing affordable access to quality produce. And I want to note that, one, they emphasize the element of quality produce that has to be produced. But the second issue that they talk about is that it also creates an hygienic environment. Let me read further and says, the undignified and unsafe conditions at our markets clearly point to the lack of appreciation for the centrality of produce market to the country's food security. And I close quote, that is from Agri-SA and IMASA. But the second issue that we need to underscore from what they are saying. They're talking about safety, but they're talking about the issue of food security. So there are three elements that then becomes critical when we talk about fresh produce markets. We talk about the issue of making sure that there is quality food. There is also safety of food, but also there is also security of food. So if fresh produce market are not able to address those three issues, our existence becomes a very questionable existence. Now, it is a well-known fact by now that there was an order from the courts that the Tshwane market must actually pay 18 million to make sure that the fresh produce market is upgraded. For example, 10 million must go to capital expenditure and 8 million must go to operational expenditure. And this is an order of court. And it's given because of the issue that I've raised earlier on, that the local sphere has a mandate to take care of these markets. So there's no way that these markets can be ignored. And I think this you must bear in mind that the Tshwane fresh produce market has an annual turnover of 3.5 billion and provides produce to 6.5 million people. Now, you can't therefore ignore such important elements of running this industry if you're looking at these figures that we're talking about. And the question then becomes very important. How does an institution that has so much turnover of 3.5 billion and feeds 6.5 million people fails to actually take care of its own infrastructure, the very infrastructure that is supposed to be actually creating an environment for this situation? So I'm raising these two things to you, Chairperson, and members of the forum, to say that the importance of the fresh produce market is so much important that we cannot ignore it. Now, having said that, I think it then becomes important to ask ourselves, what then becomes the role of the fresh produce markets? I think one, we have agreed that the issue of infrastructure becomes a critical element of it. Secondly, the issue of creating a platform for competition, because what IMASA and Agri-SA probably didn't actually talk to, because that's not what they were looking for, is that there must be a competitive environment in the space of fresh produce market. But what we have seen in the past is that there has not been any level playing field in terms of making sure that the economy is inclusive. Now, the trading platform becomes a fiefdom of certain individuals, unfortunately, those who have been involved in the industry. So I think then it becomes critical that from the issue that were raised by IMASA and Agri-SA, we ask ourselves, is there proper competition taking place around these issues? The fourth issue that we must add, is there an issue of quality assurance when it comes to the food that is being produced and that is being brought to the market? And key to this issue is the issue of security, because we have had cases where lives have been threatened in terms of armed robbery and even ensuring that the monies of the farmers have been taken care of. So if fresh produce market does not take care of this issue, it then becomes a very critical issue. But I want to raise two issues, Chairperson, before I close. One issue is what I call an unfunded mandate, which is supplier development program. To what extent, as fresh produce market, do we play a role in making sure that we allow new entrants of participants in that? Do we have supplier development program? But the question is, do we have a mandate to go backwards? Because our role as far as fresh produce market centers around being a channel of creating a platform for trading. Now, this becomes a very critical element. That is why, therefore, we need to be innovative. And we as fresh produce market, we are making a proposal that now we need to create a space for new entry, which is through what is called a food hub system. A food hub system should be focused largely on small scale farmers, and cooperatives, to make sure that we create space for them and create a new regime for them so that they can be able to participate in this. But attached to it, then you can be able to create what we call offtake agreements with private sector and even and government. And then it defines the role. What then becomes the role of government in this regard? I think government then becomes critical for the following reasons. And I'm going to end there, Chairperson, after I've mentioned this issue. One, I think government has a lot of money that they have given to small-scale farmers. But when you ask whether do we have a database of these farmers, the issue is no, we don't have a database of these farmers. Do we know where they are in terms of the geospatial mapping? And that information is not forthcoming. And the issue of the intergovernmental relations, how do hospitals make sure that they buy from schools, buy from fresh produce market, especially supporting the small-scale farmers? And I think for us as fresh produce market chairperson, and I want to end on this point, that as long as we do not necessarily create that space to make sure that there are new players, then this industry becomes an industry for certain individuals, and also the likelihood that it might die and become a dinosaur, become a big challenge for us. And I just want to learn there, Chairperson, and say, if we want to introduce new agencies, we want to introduce new innovative ways, we must actually create new farmers, and those new farmers can be produced through the help of government and also through other stakeholders involved. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you, Mr. Mpulu. That was a mouthful. I'm sure the colleagues on the platform are ready to engage you. I would like to take hands, any questions, any comments on what Mr. Mpulu has presented to us. Colleagues, you are most welcome to raise your hand and we recognize you. All right, in the absence of hands, thank you, Mr. Mpulu, very much for your presentation. It would have been very much easier to follow you if you had a PowerPoint presentation prepared, but thank you, it was very informative. Moving right along on our program, since Mr. Nkunjane has indicated that he is at the airport, if you allow me, colleagues, let us swap his presentation to come up next. Mr. Nkunjane, are you ready? Are we okay with that proposal, colleagues, of giving the platform to Mr. Nkunjane?
Yes, Chair.
All right. I don't know if he will be projecting a presentation.
I have shared, Chair, with the colleagues. I don't know if they can be able to project it.
All right. Katu, please assist us. In the meantime, you can do your opening remarks, Mr. Nkunjane,
Okay.
while we are projecting.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Good morning to everyone on the call. So as introduced earlier on, my name is Thabile Nkunjana. I'm within the NAMC, and I'm just going to be giving you a brief developments around the fresh produce market, touching on issues like your prices, climate change, electricity problems, your other externalities that are affecting the industry in general. So that will be in both in South Africa and abroad. So in the interest of time, I don't know if the colleagues are struggling with this. I'll try to also share the presentation with you colleagues from my side. All right, thanks, Rambao. Yes, sir, it is visible, and thank you for that. Next slide, please. Okay, so 2022 and early 2023 have been interesting, times for the fresh produce at large. That is also covering the agricultural space in generally, and this has been because of the challenges that have been, that have been experienced from the elevated fertilizer issues, the other input prices for other pesticides things, and then your supply interruptions, climate related problems, restrictions in trade, and of course the issue in the Ukraine or the Black Sea. So as a result of those challenges that we have experienced, a number of countries reacted to that, and as a result they developed some certain policies, something that we have seen during the early periods of the Russian issue and Ukraine, where countries have actually implemented some trade restrictions with countries like your Middle Asian countries, some limiting their imports. As of the 13th of March this year, at least 22 countries have implemented 26 export bans on certain foods, and 10 countries had implemented 14 export limitations. That is, certain products would be exported for certain quantities, and these challenges, of course, affected the fresh produce, especially the onions, tomatoes, potatoes, fruit, and other processed fruits. Now, from the global fresh produce developments, if one is following what is happening globally, for instance, in the European Union, there has been an issue with the supply of energy. And then, of course, the poor production due to unfavorable weather and high fertilizer prices, as I explained, and then limited export from key European suppliers. For instance, the issue of supply energy, EU, as we are aware, that it is to buy a lot of its energy from Russia, and because of the conflict, they have been struggling to supply some of their countries. For instance, Spain and Netherlands, they are some of the key countries that produce and supply EU with fresh produce market products. And as was earlier this year and later last year mentioned, that Spain, for instance, was having issues, particularly with the area that is on the south of the country that produces a lot of their fresh produce. It has had issues, which is why, in fact, it even went as far as buying some fresh produce, especially onions, from South Africa. Same thing with Netherlands. We have reported a significant reduction in their some of their products which they supply into the European Union and other countries, particularly in Africa. And then when it comes to Africa, we've seen an increasing demand in generally, and this, of course, it offsets the issues that South Africa has had with countries like in Botswana and Namibia, especially Botswana, where we're seeing like our export earnings there declining around 50% because of the ban that they have put into place for South African fresh produce. But unfortunately, or at least fortunately for South African producers, we have seen a demand in other countries, including the likes of Angola, Mozambique, and small quantities to other countries like DRC. So that kind of offset the issues that have happened in Botswana, but for Namibia, it was not of a bigger issue. Next slide, Chair. So the figure that is in front of you, it's just a view of what the South African fresh export market looks like, or at least in 2022 in terms of values. Africa remains the supplier or the biggest buyer of our fresh produce. This includes everything that is fresh in terms of our production, that is your onions, potatoes, which is one part that our potatoes of South Africa are going into, and then the European Union, Asia and Middle East constitute around 10%, and then others took around 4% of that. So the interesting thing here is that from the European Union, as I mentioned earlier, that because of the difficulties that they've experienced, this is something that actually happened even in 2028 when they have issues with drought. But this time around, they have a couple of issues in terms of production, and of course the issues around the electricity, so which is why it affected their supply, especially because they are using green gas houses. So the electricity was a problem for that. So this is how the market looked like for the South African fresh produce as of last year. And next slide there. So in terms of the fraud, if you had to look, because I've used these numbers like for 2021 using numbers from the CGA. So if you can look into that, for orange specifically, the European Union accounted for 34% of our oranges, and then Middle East 18, Southeast Asia 14, United Kingdom 10, Russia, and North America, with North America being the USA being the most prominent market in the North American part of that region. So that's how the market looked like. So I've used these numbers based on the CGA. I think they are yet to produce the 2022 report, which is why I've used that one. And then as for the right figure, it shows the trend in terms of exports as of last year using the data from the ITC. As you can see that we continue increasing our exports. And of course, the EU remains the key market to that, which is why we are currently having the issues around the blue cloth modeling issue around the oranges. So that is why that market remains an important market for South Africa. Next slide, Chair. So as for apples, Africa remains a key product, the leading so far market, and then followed by Far East Asia, United Kingdom, Middle East, Europe, and Russia. So as you can see that, of course, those numbers, again, they are from 2002. I've chosen those numbers specifically because Hotgrow, which we tend to use their numbers, they're still to produce the latest report. And then the figure on the right, it shows the trend on the apples exports as of 2022. As you also can see, the same trend, it is happening as we saw from the oranges, even though that we had significant issues in 2018 and 19. So the market or the export have covered very well, especially for the past two seasons, 2021 and 2022. Hopefully that this year is gonna be showing us the same trajectory. Next slides, Chair. So the pairs follow the same trend as well, but what one thing that I think is important for pairs, and specifically, I think that their market, it tends to be, as much as it's concentrated mainly into the European Union. I think it is fairly diverse compared to those products that we found out we have, like your fresh produce in general, that tend to go to one region, which appears to be risky, as we've seen during the conflict in Russia and Ukraine things. So I think it is important that we try to diversify that. But at least for now, it doesn't appear to be an issue for pears and apples. So as you can see from the figure also on the right, we have also seen a number of increases in markets and exports to the world. But of course, the 2022 numbers are an estimate, because again, Hotgrow is to have to produce their a report for the last season. So that number then is based on the numbers that are available from SARS for now. So it normally tends to not be relatively the same, but that's how things are looking up to for now. So hopefully it won't be as different. Next slide, Chet. So looking at the fresh produce market for fruit in terms of the prices, one thing that is clear from this figure is that we have times when we will see that prices tend to move up and then go down and all that, and that is specifically because of the times when we receive these. For instance, apples and pears, they begin to be produced to be harvested from January, and that season I think still somewhere there. So that's why you find out that around that time, from at least later and like now, around April to coming to May and June, prices tend to go on to move around that. And then of course, when that season tends to be slower in terms of harvesting, then prices spike. You can see from the figures, those spikes in all these commodities, they show you that the times that we'll receive when we'll be harvesting, and then of course the times that will be out of season, something that we have seen over the past few years. It is the same trend that we are seeing now. So and one thing that is interesting here is oranges, given that we are still having issues, as you can see from the gray figure there. It looks like we are still following the same trend, but of course, I mean, it's still relatively early in terms of telling what is going to happen. So it will be interesting to see how these prices are going to look like coming to the end of the season. Next slide, Chair. And also for the vegetables, the same trend is observed, as expected, that the tomatoes tend to be having relatively higher prices compared to other commodities in terms of tonnage. This is something that we have seen recently, especially for onions. Onions, for a number of reasons, as I mentioned earlier, that we have seen a spike in some of the demand from the produce that are coming from South Africa to the world, especially for the European Union, but it's something that I'm going to touch on in the next coming two slides. So as you can see that we have seen spikes for both tomatoes and and onions in recent times, including cabbage, by the way, because of the number of issues that are also going to touch. So we are also seeing the same trend as we've observed from the vegetables, and this is of course because of certain issues like when do we get to receive these produce, and also when do we transition from one part of the country to get produce from the other part of the country. Next slide, Chair. So as much as we have seen some good developments across the fresh produce market, there have been some challenges, both for the fruit and vegetables. Specifically for fruit, it is infrastructure, which is something that has been talked about immensely, and it actually still persists in some other ports. I was talking to some colleagues not so long ago from the western part of the country. They're still talking about some of those infrastructure issues and challenges. So that is another issue around the logistical part of things. And then the electricity load sharing, it remains an issue, and especially when it comes to storing products that needs to be prepared for the market and those that needs to be produced because of irrigation processes and all that. So the electricity remains an issue for those. And then the EU market requirements for the citrus exports, as I've mentioned earlier on, that as shown, of course, from the figure that the EU, it is such an important market for the citrus, and therefore it is giving us issues in terms of supplying it at the moment. But that's something that we hopefully is going to be sorted. And then in terms of the insects outbreaks that tend to affect these the certain orchards and all that, which affects the produce of fruit. It's something that I think it's a couple of years we have seen, but as much as there's not been much, but there's still some challenges around that. And of course, if one brings the issue of the insecticides that are to be used, given that we have some that are tend to be, or at least said to be out of date, or some are not being used in some of the markets that we export to, and that's something that we need to look into. And then of course the Green Deal, but of course that one I've put a question mark around it because it's still a developing thing. And of course, as you have seen from the slides that I've showed you earlier, that the EU, which is the one that is implementing the Green Deal, it is an important market for all of our products that are going to so that Green Deal is going to have implications for us and how we produce our produce that we send there. So it's something that we need to look into, but for now it is not necessarily a challenge. That's why I've put a question mark around it, but I think it's going to develop to be something that we need to follow properly, and probably become a challenge if we don't adhere to some of the issues. Then for vegetables, the same thing with the electricity is there. A lot of our horticultural products, including fruit, around 90%, some areas tend to be irrigated, and therefore the electricity issue can be a serious problem to that. And that's something that you'll see, because as of towards end of last year, it has been intensifying, and that's something that should be worried about. But hopefully the measures that are being put are going to be able to sort of address that. And then as far as the climate concern, is there also another issue, be it too dry, excessive rains and all that. So there are a number of issues that tend to talk to the climate patterns, which is some of the issues that we have that we are currently experiencing, the issues around the shortages in onion because of the drought that was experienced in some parts of the western parts of the country, Las Heras, and parts of Northern Cape. So the climate issues there were part of the problem in terms of us receiving lesser than we normally get, and also of course having a demand elsewhere. And then higher fertilizers and other inputs. So of course, I've mentioned this earlier on, that this is some of the issues, especially if you talk of vegetables like cabbages and spinach, those that require a lot of nitrogen fertilizers. Those fertilizers have been an issue. So I would say that it has been a challenge, but at least hopefully things now have been improving, and that's something that you should be glad and be happy about. But of course, the market has to first sort of erode what they have bought earlier on in terms of the prices, and then things are going to go smoothly, hopefully, in the next few months. And then, of course, insects. This is one thing that affected specifically cabbage. I think one of those issues that have affected the supply of cabbage was the outbreak in insects. This is something that we have, at least we have received from the number of speakers, of farmers that we have communicated with when we realized that there was an issue in the cabbage. So they mostly cited that they had issued outbreaks and that, which is one thing that affected their produce. So something that is always going to be there when there are hails and all those kind of things. And then the market is a challenge specifically for ginger and garlic. This is because, for instance, if you can look into the numbers, that ginger is down in 2022, 56%, and then is in exports, and the white garlic is down 19%. This is specifically because there was a significant increase in production around 2020 and 2021 because of the COVID demand that was because these commodities were really in demand around that time, with countries that are buying from South Africa increasing intensively their exports. So we have increased production, but unfortunately, as of late, the demand has not been there. So the market, it remains an issue for these two commodities. Next slide, Chair. So this will be my second last slide. So generally, there still, as much as we have challenges, there's still opportunities for fresh produce from South Africa, and this is because of a rising demand, specifically from the global space, especially for vegetables, which is in Africa. As much as we had issues, but it looks like we're still up increasing our market there, so which is a good thing. And of course, we've seen that as well in the European Union, at least for now, because of the challenges that they've had. So something that I think in the short time is still going to be there. So we're still seeing a bit of opportunities there. And I'm thinking, when I was looking to the numbers specifically for onions and pumpkins, it appears there's still an issue there. So probably, as much as we're expecting to see downward prices towards June, when we receive a lot of other supply for onions, I think maybe we might still have issues in terms of the EU might still have some persisting issues. Therefore, that market might still be available, but something that we're going to have to monitor. And then, of course, the production and exports for all of these production products that we have in South Africa have increased over the years, particularly exports for the potatoes, even though we tend to export potatoes into Africa, but there's still been a good increase in our exports, which we saw at least, I think, around 1% increase last year, given despite the issues that we have had for other commodities, especially going to Botswana. And then, of course, for onions and pumpkins, as I said, to the European Union, there's still a relatively good market there. I was seeing not so long ago that still there's a lot of demand for pumpkins, even though around this time Europe tend to receive a lot of their supply to their internally countries. So also within one of the things that, though, as much as we have these promising opportunities and all that, the state is gonna have to assist through. This can be through the trade agreements, be it bilaterally or other forms of trade agreements, to the for the exporters and producers to countries like China, South Korea, Japan, Vietnam, and so forth. And this is basically because those countries, they have relatively larger populations, and of course they have good prospects in terms of economies perspective. So it is an important thing that we tend to, or at least we try to get some sort of agreements, something that we have seen for at least it has materialized very well for the beef industry. So I think for the fresh produce, particularly for fruit, we need to look into those countries and try to make sure that we get to address that. And then these countries, relatively, because of the issues that I've mentioned, that they are similar to Middle East, the economic prospects are good, so we need to focus on that. Next slides, please, Chair. So in closing, so there appears to be a relatively good demand in the global space for South Africa, but the issues around the EU nitrogen reduction have a potential to affect our produce market or its dynamics in the near future. That is it is going to be important that we follow that very well, and of course it will remain a competitor there. But I think, given the current issues, we are still having a good chance to be able to to increase or expand our production there. But one thing that I think is going to be important is to ensure that we have a local supply, at least try to bring in even the smaller players into the market, because the more the demand of our products outside, it means there's going to be a space within. So we need to channel those smallholder farmers into the commercial space. And then, of course, in Africa, we still have the issues in terms of their inefficiency and market condition distortions that allow South Africa to produce and exporters to increase their footprint in that market. So I think it still have a room to expand there, even though that we still have a bit of issues here and there in terms of other trade distortions and all that, but I still feel like we still have a bit of room. And then of course the Middle East, as I said earlier, the issues around population and economic prospects, they still offer us some bit of space to expand into that market. That will be the end of my presentation, Chair. Apologies, I'm rushing a little bit because of the time. Apologies for that. Otherwise, I'll be glad to take some questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Nkunjane, for that comprehensive presentation covering contemporary issues in prices, climate change, electricity, and the Russia-Ukraine conflict. I'm going to open the floor now for any questions for Mr. Nkunjane or for any comments or any reactions to the presentation. Really, I know for potatoes, fuel and fertilizer account for 25% of the producer's input costs. So really, this is a challenge. Colleagues, do you have any questions? Okay, it's been very quiet. Right, thank you so much, Mr. Nkunjane, for that presentation. It was clear. We are going to move along with our program, and we are going to have our next presentation, which is going to come from IMASA, which is going to be covering the outlook of market agents in fresh produce markets value chain. Do we have a representative from IMASA? Can we please confirm, colleagues? Katu? And thank you so much.
There's no one.
From IMASA?
Yes.
All right. Okay. And then we are going to move to Thomas Mawasha from CBMA, who's going to cover transformation and smallholder participation in the fresh produce market. Do we have Thomas? Katu, will you please confirm?
It's not here. It's not here. Let me do a follow-up. I'll get back to you just to check it.
Kindly do a follow-up with all the speakers that are on the program and double check if they are present online, and you can drop me a text on WhatsApp. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
And then I know we have the colleague from Apex, Mr. Knowles. Can you give us your presentation now? Are you ready?
Yes, indeed, I am. Thank you very
All
much
right.
for the opportunity. If you will just allow me to please share my presentation on the screen.
All right.
It's always a challenge. So it is on there, supposedly. Please tell me if you can see that.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, I just want to make it a little bigger. Tell me if you can see that.
Yes, we can see it clearly. Thanks.
Okay. To everybody here present today and all the colleagues, thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm going to go through this with great speed, given the time that I was afforded, which I'm very appreciative of. So please bear with me. All right. I need to talk about regulation in fresh produce and the implications for the future. For the farmers here today, I've got the following message. Please, whenever you interact with people, and we are in the business of people, please choose wisely. When you work with agents, choose wisely, because they are the people that are important to the the determination of your income and the prices concerned for sales. So, as I said, business of people, the relationship of trust. Bear in mind that South Africa was grey listed, and that is very important. So regulation becomes more and more important going forward. The second principle that I would like to touch on is the following. Does a farmer have a market or an offset? That is a question that farmers must always ask themselves. I listen to people that talk about doubling yields and so forth. If you do not have a market, if you do not have a sales platform, what's the point? We need to take into consideration the effort that farmers go through. You need to justify the costing. There must always be a focus on quality and output. The increased yields that I talked about, marketing, then of course sales, and you have to find the perfect platform that will suit your business. And then ultimately, whatever you do, if it's not translating into an effort that is profit at the end of the day, you cannot make a living. Farmers, please consider carefully when you embark on a specific route. Okay, I'm trying to move. Let me just do. Okay, ultimately, then we need to talk about: do you use a market or do you not? So quickly to touch on the origins of markets, and it's very important that we just reiterate this for amongst one another again. These markets are platforms that facilitate trade, and this happens across the world. Traditionally, this was under the control of a government body or official. This has now changed the last couple of years because you see private markets arising and popping up everywhere. But they do remain centralized places where trade is being facilitated, and ultimately also price formulators. And we talk about price discovery on behalf of farmers. That is very important. That is where agents come to their full potential, because they are the experts to facilitate this process. Some important points about fresh produce markets. It was, if you take the history into account, it was initially to fill the emerging gap in the market between large and small scale trade. To this day, that's really important. But we see some gaps starting to be very visible when trade is facilitated at fresh produce markets. But even to this day, we've got a very good transportation system. And believe it or not, taking into account that you have issues with potholes and bad roads, but we still have a good transport system that works, a road transport system. Right, then at fresh produce markets, we've got commission system in place, which allows the agent to earn more commission the performance that they can achieve. And then, of course, there's linkage for and a platform for small commercial farmers. And at this point in time, I always tell people we must get away from calling farmers upcoming or emerging farmers. We need to label them correctly for the future. Let's call them small commercial farmers, because we want them to be the large and medium commercial farmers of the future. So problems that we are experiencing, there's some retail concentration that's being happening, and it's putting pressures on markets. But we must remember that satellite markets are really beneficial to providing food and food safety and security to the people out there. Right, so let's have a look at the markets in South Africa. In 1940, we had a lot of markets. This was then changed over years, and fast forward to 2022, we've currently got 39 platforms, market platforms. 17 of these platforms are markets that operate individually, but we regard them as markets, and they are registered with APAC. 15 markets of national interest are your larger markets like Durban, Cape Town, Tshwane, and Joburg. And then we've got 7 smaller regional markets like the Vaal market, the Moketsi market, the Polokwane market, to name but a few. In total, from a APAC perspective, we have got 924 market agents, of which 757 are salespeople. Those are the people that are responsible for the income that comes from markets. They are the experts, they are the people that we must support unconditionally. Okay. Right, so let's have a look at market performance. I'm going to do this for 2 years, in 2021-22, that financial year. We had an interesting situation where the volumes sold increased by 2.4%, and subsequently the turnover decreased by 0.89%, less than 1%. Now, that is perfectly a textbook perfect scenario if you look at supply and demand. But we must take into consideration, in the greater scheme of things, we did not grow either both negative or positive substantially, and that is a real concern. If we look at the figures for April 2023, there was a different scenario. We had a great growth in turnover of 15%, negative turnover in the mass that was sold, so we sold less through markets, and that again is a perfect situation where supply and demand comes into play. Looking at May, and these figures I only received this morning, there's 2 problems here. I think Tondo alluded to markets as platforms. The first one you will see is that Umtata presented us with a 0 turnover for May. And that is one of the problems of establishing fresh produce market agents across South Africa. Umtata is having trouble with that, and we've got a great responsibility to assist them to get that market up and running. If we look at the turnover and mass figures, it's a very interesting one. This turnover grew by 30%, and mass was down by minus 1%, 1% in total. And that's a good scenario, but because that means we didn't sell that much less, and we made more money off the produce that was sold for farmers. However, it begs the question, are we feeding a nation? And I will get to that. So we have to ask the question, where is the problem? There's some generic threats to fresh produce markets, and I'm going to name a few. It's that we have limited reinvestment into municipal markets by municipalities. Sadly so, I think there's much greater focus on water, housing, medical issues, and we must never ever neglect markets, because they are the platforms that supply us with food. Sadly so, there's some instances of bad management or management that is inhibited, and this is causing decreasing market share of sales going through markets. Overall, sustainability is very important, and that is something that Tondo also alluded to previously. And then what we find is that there's increased focus and demand for quality and health. And this is really becoming the norm. People want good food coming from good platforms. It must be healthy, it must be safe, etc., etc. So what we see is that the private sector is slowly moving away from our formidable platforms, and this must be addressed in some very creative way. And we must also, the last point that I would like to reiterate is that we must be very careful to think that if we throw money off the fresh produce platforms, that it's going to solve the problem. We must, in my personal opinion, rather look at a remodeling of the way that markets are operating. You can paint a building, it's not going to make a difference in terms of your turnover and provision of food. We must remodel the way we are doing things currently. Globally, this has already been alluded to. I think the war in Ukraine, we must take note of that. It's affecting everything, even down to the local level. AMIS Market Monitor teaches us things like there's exceptional hikes in prices for energy, fertilizer, low stock-to-use ratios for some commodities, and I'm not going to go into the detail of that. Poor weather, food price inflation across the globe, and then local food prices that have been increasing over the last year and since COVID. Locally, what is happening? We've got load shedding, which is a real issue. Diesel is becoming expensive. There's a shortage at some points. There's a massive impact on agriculture, which is causing a decreased production. And then storage issues is becoming a problem as well, specifically if you look at Transnet and the harbors when there's a blockage at export points. Water is an issue as of late, and that is something that I believe will be the next big issue. And we must focus on these things because all these aspects impact adversely on fresh produce markets and the food that we require. Important to just touch on this. South Africa unemployment is 32.9%. Certainly we have to do something about that. The South African inflation rate, it's currently at about 7.23%. Albeit that it's in a downward trend, we must still take cognizance of this figure. Then I'm going to touch on these things. We all know about high crime, unsustainable and resource-intensive growth path. There must be work done there. Our public health system is under threat, and that's where food security can play a huge role. Fuel price, weakening rand, Transnet, many more. Now, that sounds like a very negative picture, but here's the good news. In South Africa, the population, as of yesterday, is about 61 million people. And the good news here is that all these people must eat. And that means farmers, we will play so much bigger and more important role going into the future. So let's quickly then just stop for a second at the role of the agent. The perfect agent, in my opinion, and these apologies in advance because this is the way I see it, you have to be a lion, you have to be tough, you have to keep everybody happy, the farmer, the buyer. You must be like an elephant with a thick skin, a bit of a magician because you have to translate produce to good income for the farmer, and you have to keep the buyer happy. The owl represents wisdom, and then probably that you have to start very, very early in the morning. And then this thunderfletch, in my opinion, you've got to be a bit of a bliksem as well. This is hard work, and it requires tough people to maintain this beautiful profession of ours. Now, it's important to allude to why regulation is indeed necessary. Democratic governments need and rely on laws that will protect people from harmful things that they cannot do on their own. And that comes from the South African Constitution, which is a perfect example. Regulations are vital to the proper functioning of economies and societies, and it creates basically the rules of the game for people out there. They underpin markets, protect the rights and safety of citizens, and ensure good governments. And this is the basic role of good government. For APAC, why do we exist? We have got two focuses. We ultimately look after the interest of farmers that do business through market agents. And then also we have to enhance and look after the agents that we regulate. They are the best. They're using the best skill sets possible. And ultimately, for us in this ethical environment, we need to make sure that the regulation is focused perfectly to align with our goals. If you ever work with a fresh produce agent, you can ask them for two things. They've got a certificate of registration with APAC. That means you are protected should something go wrong. We will play a facilitation role and more if it's required. And you also can ask for a bank-like registration card. Now, in summary, what APAC does is we're the watchdog of the industry. And if you are a naughty agent, and I'm not saying they are exceptional people, but if there's something that goes wrong, APAC will will come to the party, and we will protect the farmers and whoever needs protection or assistance in this process. Ultimately, if you look from a helicopter point of view down at the environment, the green represents farming activities. Yellow is your commercial activities like transport and packaging and getting it to the markets. And on the outer perimeter, APAC is there looking downwards and doing regulation on the value chain where agents are involved. Quickly important to allude to the following. The legislation, the APAC legislative framework constitutes the following. Our primary act, which is Act 12 of 1992, updated in 2003, supported by 3 sets of ethical rules. And I think for today's discussion, it's important to just allude to the rules in respect of fresh produce agents. These rules give effect, detailed effect, to the objectives of the Act, and if you need more information on that, you are welcome to contact our office. We do other things. We work in livestock and we're involved in biosecurity and things like that. But I think it's important just to note that there's an Act, the primary Act, supported by rules, and that this Act will be, or it's in process to be amended sometime in the foreseeable future. That's a long process, so we're not quite there yet, but it's in process. Please note that. Okay, so let's quickly bump up to markets. An agent needs a platform to operate. The focus is thus on the market, and 4 Ps, for those of you who did marketing at university or somewhere training, 4 very important Ps. Product that comes from the farmer. There's a price, and that's determined by the market. You need the place, which is ultimately the market, and there must be promotion to do this to the benefit of the industry and the South Africa at large. I think Tondo also alluded to legislation. I just want to find the legislation in the Constitution. It gives authority for a municipality through executive authority to administer a fresh produce market, but only if that market has the required capacity and resources to do so. This is very important. This is where markets find their mandate. Locally, markets have municipal bylaws, and this is really important because a bylaw serves to govern anything that is not contained in any other regulation or contract. And we must be very careful that we just willingly allow these documents to be published. We must scrutinize them, hit them with a bat, because we have to get the best out of these bylaws that will serve a beautiful industry. And that is, again, a very personal opinion. Now, looking at markets, you need 4 pillars, and this is my opinion as well. You need good security. If there's none, people will not frequent the market. There must be maintenance. If there's a pothole in the entrance gate, people will not go there. Hygiene, if it's dirty, again, people will not go there. And the glue that keeps everything together is good management. You need strong, consistent, good management, and we see too many changes at markets that is not consistent. Now, the elephant in the room is the Competition Commission, because I think their role is really important, and I would like to just align this with our goals. I think we're seeking to achieve the same. They published their intent to do an inquiry in 2022. It was confirmed this year in February, and we submitted from APAC a letter to them to give our official position of support, and that we want to work with them to find the problems of competition within the industry. The elephant I alluded to is there was an investigation in 2017 which is still to see the light. My advice is to the Competition Commission, we have to get this done, and we have to either have a result or an indication of the way forward with that specific inquiry. It's really important. But please take note of the Competition Commission. They are around. They've got sharp teeth. They have a very specific job to do, and we provide our unconditional support to them. Now, in closing, I would like to say the following. We have to be very truthful to one another about what's happening at our markets. We cannot, for the life of me, allow our markets, our beautiful, formidable former institutions to fail. So let's not compromise. And if it's not working, we need to rethink our approach and change. And we need to be very, very specific. And we mustn't make general statements. We have to work hard. We cannot afford to lose our formidable institutions of price discovery. This is where agents find their home. This is where they do their job. We have to look after this. And the last quote, let us use anger in a positive way to change the conditions that make us angry. We have to find solutions, and let's not fight, let's find solutions. So I'm going to stop there. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and I hand back over to you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Knowles, for that interesting presentation. I see we have very interesting comments and questions on the chat bar. I think I will open the floor for questions. I don't know if Ms. Gwen wants to pose the questions herself, or I can read them myself. I see also there's a hand. Okay. All right.
I'm
Over to
happy.
you. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm happy to come in very quickly, and it might be a bit beyond today, but the whole focus, and there was reference to the EU Green Deal, the whole climate change, sustainability, sustainable development goals, and now the ESG, environments, sustainability and governance, all of that, environment, social and governance, all of that puts our rural area producers, our smallholder farmers, in a positive light, because the data that is required comes from ground level, if I can put it that way. That comes down to systems, that comes down to evidence of integrity in that data. And the block at present is that we take a top-down approach very often. So even things like current changes in labels that have come out from Department of Health have an impact. And I believe if we take a 5-year view, if you like, there will be an opportunity for smallholders, managed producer groups, to benefit, gain carbon credits from the carbon economy, and sell them to big industry and through the chain, if I can put it that way. So the whole lot comes together. We're looking at a 5-year to 7-year plan. I believe that we can be number one, and that's very much where I'm coming from, because the markets obviously are key, but it comes back to saying, how do we verify that this produce has been produced in a way that is beneficial to the overall economy, if we look at the carbon state and where we are headed? Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Gwen. Mr. Nkunjana.
Hi, Madam Chair. So my question is directed to Francis. So you mentioned something that we are losing the market. Now, is it this market are we losing over time, or a specific time that is a year or something? I'd just like to have a clarity around that. Thank you, but I can repeat the question.
Thank you, Mr. Nkunjane. Mr. Mbokane, can you kindly please switch off your camera? Mr. Lindikai, Miyeki.
Thank you so much, Chairperson, and good morning, everyone on the call. Thank you so much, Francis, for a very insightful presentation. I think one of the things that you've highlighted is the fact that there is disinvestment to the markets, especially by the municipalities. And one of the ongoing debates that are out there, it's whether the markets are located in the right space, given the fact that the local government tends to prioritize housing, water, etc. And then the markets, they sort of like found themselves at the periphery. They don't maybe get that much priority. And also in light of the fact that there was a proposal by the Section 7 committee report of the NAMC that perhaps maybe there should be some form of a structure that looks after these markets. So my question is, in light of all maybe the background that I've just shared with you, what is the stand or the take of APAC? Do you still think that the markets are well placed, or they should continue in the space where they are? And also in light of the unstable government coalitions that we've seen in recent years. Thank you so much.
All right, Mr. Knowles, I'm going to give it to you before I get to the chat bar for you to respond to the questions that were posed to you.
Madam Chair, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the questions. I think I wish I could give you all the perfect answers, but I'm going to do my best. Losing of markets, and the reference was made to a specific market in Mthatha. Mthatha is a very challenging area because it's very far, it's very difficult, and you need sustainable business to be maintained there. And I can tell you what we've done is we are very vigilant in taking hands with the NAMC to see if we can find solutions there. And I can tell you there are solutions, and we must be very creative in the way that we find solutions. We must also not shy away from answers or trying to just eliminate something like, oh yeah, we're losing a market. We simply cannot afford that. We need to. I think when I look at these markets and when I look at the figures, it makes me realize that I need to work twice as hard to make an effort from our side, even if it's small, to make markets function. So the reference to the losing of markets is a great concern. We simply cannot afford to lose markets. Now, on the flip side, some of the work that we do is if we find, and please hear me very clearly on this, I'm not saying anybody is not doing unethical business all over the show. But if somebody is found of something like that and we take them out, we must also be very careful because we might just close down a market. In trying to do good, we can impact on many jobs, many people, and we have such an important role to do the regulatory work in balance. But good governance will always prevail. So just hear me, please. We are working towards finding solutions, working with market authorities, working with the NAMC, working with the department. We had a project called Project Rebirth that focused on the upskilling and enhancement of markets, and sadly that is no longer effective because it was a voluntary process, and we need to do everything in our power to do so much more. Now, just a question about the Section 7 report. I think the Section 7 report is an important baseline for us to engage the future. It still remains as is. It was published in 2003, and we have had a discussion recently in Cape Town with the NAMC on how we can roll out the goals and the objectives of that report. So if we look at markets, and if we look at what we need to do, we must be very careful to say that we've arrived and that we are content. We can never be content. We can never be happy with the way our systems are working. We can never be happy. And here I put a disclaimer on the way that we present and share information. We very easily say that there's 20 billion rand moving through fresh produce markets. But if we say that, are we seriously responsible in thinking that everybody in South Africa is having a meal or even more than one meal a day. I don't think so. And, you know, markets are there to support business, yeah, but markets must also serve to feed the nation. Farmers are the most important people in the world. They keep us alive. Farmers from APAC, we honor you, and it makes us again realize that we have to work so much harder to get our formidable former platforms and institutions to a point where we can do so much better. Yes, we need to be truthful about where we are. We need to be truthful about municipalities that are not reinvesting. But we cannot for 1 minute sit back and accept the new norm. It's just not on. We have to do everything, and APAC as one role player, one small role player, will stand up and say, we are there, we'll take this task on. So that's a long answer. I hope it's an answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Knowles, for the responses. Let me read what is on the chat bar. It's coming from Mr. Bonani Nyoto, saying, Francis, you are correct. Farmers will continue to be a sole providers of the 3 meals of the population. We surely must think deep, ensure that more than 60% of all the meals is made up of domestically produced produce. The share of rice and wheat as imported products in our meals need to be considered an opportunity for product development by other sectors such as potatoes to potentially replace them. And then, all right, Gwen was able to take on the platform and vocalize her questions. And then we are going to take the hands that we have, and then we are going to move to our presenter from IMASA. I got an indication that the colleague is here. And we're going to take a hand from Mr. Mbolo. Over to you, sir.
No, thank you very much, Chair. No, I wanted to respond, Chair, on the element of the municipalities. It is true, though, that often at times municipalities have actually deserted the markets because they have never prioritized them. But I can report confidently now, Chair, that there has been an engagement between South African food markets, that is SUFM, and SALGA, which is the body that actually runs the municipalities. And there seems to be an appreciation of the importance of now elevating the agenda of the markets. And I think within recent moments, that is in future, we will see a big difference now that the attitude of municipalities begins to be part of the main agenda of the fresh produce market. I know Noels would have actually even highlighted the importance of having a national bylaw, something that suggests that at least there must be some uniformity in terms of how do we approach these things. I think these are discussions that we want to have to say, what are the key tenets of a fresh produce market that must be seen in every municipality? It does not matter whether it's a small or a big municipality. So as market management, we are driving that process. And I think very soon you will see the appreciation from the municipalities based on those engagements. I just wanted to add that element, Chairperson.
Thank you for updating us on those developments, Mr. Mbulu. Let's move to Mbokane Farm.
Hi, Chair.
Yes, sir.
No, hi.
Morning, Mr. Mbokane.
Yes. I just want to ask this specific question around the competitions commission's investigation into the fruit produce. What, in your opinion, will be the impact, positive and negative, of that investigation? Thank you.
Madam Chair, can I continue?
Let's take the last one from Andre Young.
Thank you, Chair Lady. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Thank you, Chair. Francois, just on the aspect of market access, which has been mentioned at the introduction, and by yourself and Thando, how is it possible that we or APAC can assist markets specifically and SAUFM to address and perhaps speed up the aspect of transformation on fresh produce markets, which in some cases is lacking and in other cases is extremely slow? Just to underpin that statement, by way of example, you'd find that we want to bring new players or new entrants into the market from the black market agents' point of view with regards to access. And the commission system, which we support in protecting and enhancing, is also an inhibiting factor, because you'll find a lot of the current existing established commercial producers which have established lifelong relationships with current market agents are a bit reluctant to want to move their business to new entrants, not particularly because the agent is of a different color, but because they new in the field. Thus finding that the new black market agents that have come in at some markets find it extremely difficult under the current system to attract commercial producers to their floors, which don't want to move away from the current market agents that they are servicing. And you know, with a new agent coming on the market, there's not automatically new farmers in the industry. Most cases you have to go and market your new agency by existing producers. So that is a system challenge that we have as fresh produce markets, to enhance that aspect of not just appointing the agents, but enhancing the access for farmers then to send produce to the agents' floors. And then the other aspect, coupled to the emerging new black market agents, is the smallholder or the small farmer that's been referred to. Markets provide access to them as well, but you'll also find in the current system, the market agents are attracted to servicing the larger commercial producers, because the smaller guys tend to provide smaller quantities. They tend to also have packaging issues or limited packaging and branding issues, which also causes their produce not to move at a speed that the commercial farmers produce. So they have access to the market, but their produce, you find, is not moving fast enough. And in cases, the agents are also not focusing on moving that small scale farmers' produce on the market. The small scale farmers also suffer another disadvantage in our commission markets, in that they do not get paid for the produce upfront that they produced. Now, we know access to financing and capital for farming operations is currently still an issue. So with the result, the producers don't get income for produce that is sent to commission markets. They have to wait, as you know, until the sale is concluded. And if the sale is not concluded because the produce didn't move because of lack of packaging, different sizes mixed up in the boxes, so their product doesn't move, and ultimately, if not sold, is then dumped. And when it's dumped under the commission system, the producer's not paid anything for his produce that's sent to the market, which is exactly the same fate that our small scale farmers would also suffer that plight. So those access related aspects from the small farmer and from the black market agent remains a challenge in the current system. And I was thinking, as APAC, how could APAC assist or intervene to assist us to overcome those challenges, addressing the issue of transformation. Siyabonga, Slalo.
Thank
Thanks.
you, Mr. Young. Over to you, Mr. Knowles, and please sum up your responses and we will move to the next presenter.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Right, the first question is the Competition Commission. I think the Competition Commission is a very important investigation, and my advice to all role players are, let's work with the Commission to find out what the true state of our industry is. If we are honest with ourselves, there's nothing to hide. We must open our books, we must open our flaws, and we must work with the Commission to find the true gist of what is going on. If there's a problem, it must be identified. If it's serious of nature, the Competition Commission will deal with that. Otherwise, we need to fix all problems out there. Just a word of caution. I come from an audit background, and if you are an auditor and you are sent to do a job, and you come back and you say everything is clear and fine, nobody will believe you. So auditors tend to find stuff. My advice is to everybody that is engaged in this process, be very careful in what you say. Have a positive working with attitude. Don't dismiss this as something that will go away. It is very, very important to ensure that our beautiful industry is protected, clean and ethical in the way forward. This inquiry was launched on the 13th of February this year. It's running for a period of 18 months. It will be the outcome will probably reach us somewhere in 2024, and I think we are interested in what their opinion will be, and it's up to us, the role players in this value chain, to make sure that they understand what we are dealing with. If you deal with a market, it's not just a question of going in there, it's like a wholesale and there's a toll. It's a very complicated process, and we must be very creative, very smart in the way that we convey this message and that we explain what is happening. Please don't leave any stone unturned if we work with the Competition Commission. Their work is really important. It's important for our industry. If I may move on, Andre, good morning. It's always nice to talk to you about market access. I made a reference in my presentation to remodeling markets, and that includes remodeling processes. As much as we have been working on old ways of trying to get things done, to my understanding and in terms of my personal opinion, I don't think we've really made very much progress in terms of being focused on transformation. So let's just put that out there. APAC has got a transformation committee, so we're very focused on trying to get our strategic approach on this matter correct. So we're working on that, but it must be measurable. It must be something that can be managed, and there must be an output. What I would like to offer, and I would like to plant a seed which you must consider. There's a fallacy that that new transformed agents must deal with small black farmers. That's not the case. We need to get market agents, whoever they are, in the market, and they must have access to all produce, to all farmers. And for me to propose something, I would like to make the following statement. Market agents should not start with where they can source the product, but rather they must look at the end where they can sell it. So if you consider a model where you talk to the big buyers, the big retail and wholesale outlets, and you tell them, I'm a new market agent, I'm beginning here, give me a letter of scope or a letter of support, and I will use that with the necessary accreditation and the necessary acknowledgement. If you use a specific new role players, work backwards and then go to farmers and tell them, I have got a buyer that will give me support on the basis that I work through a specific farmer, through a specific buyer, and we need to turn the model around. If we can get buyers to understand that if they source from the right role players, like black market agents, like black farmers, like commercial farmers, I think we can make a big difference going forward. It's a model up for discussion, but it's no longer a situation where we can just accept that we fall into the old way of doing things. If we want to make a true change in this beautiful industry, we have to come up with new and creative ideas. So for me, is rethinking the models, turning things around, pushing the limits. The last thing I would like to just touch on is you talked about frequent payments. Please note that in the APAC legislation, there is a very specific element that farmers must be paid within 5 working days after the sale of the first unit on a market floor. Even if it's 1 unit, within 5 days they must get paid, and this is simply there to stimulate cash flow and to make sure that farmers are getting money, even if it's for one sale. So let me stop there for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Knowles from APAC, for giving us a presentation on regulations on fresh produce trading and implications for the future. Thank you so much. We appreciate you. We are going to move to our next presenter, who is going to be Mr. Thomas from CBMA, who's going to give us a presentation on transformation and smallholder participation. Katu.
Sorry, there's a hand from Bokane Farm.
Unfortunately, I will not take any hands now. I will take hands again when we open for discussions, unless
Sorry,
it's a
that's
burning
an old
issue.
Sorry, Chair, that's an old hand. Apologies.
Okay, all right.
All right, all right. Do we have Mr. Mawasha?
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Thomas Mawasha here. I've got some technicalities in regard to projecting. So I've asked colleagues there from NAMC to project for me, then I shall take you through the presentation. Thanks.
Right, colleagues from the NAMC, please project. Right,
yeah, thank you, Chair. And just by way of clarification, the brief that I was given was to prepare presentation on marketing of vegetables in a fresh produce market. But I see on the agenda, it talks about transformation and smallholder participation. I had covered the issue on transformation and smallholder participation in the previous webinar that we had. So I just felt that from the onset, I need to clarify that my presentation will be focusing on marketing of vegetables in fresh produce market. So there shouldn't be any confusion. Thank you. Next. Yeah, this table of contents basically just outlines the key items that I'll be covering in the presentation. I will be looking at the top selling vegetables, what the numbers tells us, provide a brief overview of national fresh produce market and the marketing of vegetable commodities in national fresh produce market, and why farmers should strive to protect and utilize this particular channel, but also we'll be looking at the benefits of using the channel. What are the marketing trends with regard to vegetables, and I think at the end, just to give you a brief overview of who CBMA is, which is the organization that I represent. Thank you. Next. Next slide, please. Yeah, in the main, we will be looking at providing a high-level overview of the national fresh produce market, but also looking at the top-selling commodities and some key aspects of, the vegetable sector in as far as utilizing the national fresh produce market as a channel. Next, please. The next slide. Next one. Just by way of background, I know that I may be preaching to the converted, but it's important that we note that the greatest share of vegetables that are produced in the country are channeled largely through the national fresh produce market. It is estimated that the channel accounts for about 60% of the crop that is produced in any season in the country. So by that it means that a sizable number of what is produced is basically consumed locally, with the extra crop exported to the neighboring countries of Namibia, Botswana, Lesotho. And I know for sure that as far as the DRC and Zambia, they also source the bulk of their produce in South Africa. Next. Next slide. In terms of the previous one, please. Yeah. Top of the pyramid in terms of top selling commodities is potatoes, which accounts for 24% of all commodities commodities sold at the market, and about 36% of all vegetables in the market. It's followed by tomato, which accounts for 10% of all produce commodities that are sold in national fresh produce market, but also account for about 15% of vegetables procured across the markets. Third, it's onion, which basically comes just above tomato, accounts for 13% of commodities sold and about 20% of all vegetables sold in national fresh produce market. And all other vegetables that include your cucumber, your cabbage, it will be your butternuts, your green peppers, they account for 19% of commodities sold and about 29% of all vegetables procured in national fresh produce market. The next slide, please. By way of numbers, I think colleagues may have already shared with you the previous turnover for this particular channel was about 20.9 billion. That is the value of fruits and vegetables sold in national fresh produce markets in the past financial year alone. This is the financial year that ended in June 2022. Next. Of that 20.9 billion, about 13.9 billion is attributed to vegetables alone, meaning that the balance is attributed to fruits. So yeah, you can see there that vegetables account for over 60% of commodities that are sold in national fresh produce market. Next. 66%, I think, to be precise, in terms of the contribution of vegetables to national fresh produce market. About 9.8 billion is the gross turnover of the top three commodities. Those are your potatoes, your onions, and tomatoes. They account for quite a sizable chunk of the 20.9 billion generated by the channel. 693 million is the value growth of vegetables in national fresh produce markets in one financial year. It's important to note that the growth unfortunately was as a result of inflation, because of we are not seeing a lot of tonnage being channeled through the markets. If anything, the graph has remained relatively flat. So this remains a big challenge for the industry to begin to basically attract more volumes to come through the channel, but nonetheless it's a significant growth in as far as turnover is concerned. Next. 5 billion is the gross value of potatoes alone, sold on the fresh produce market, platform. In terms of onion, about 2.7, billion, worth of onions were sold in the platform in the past financial year alone. Tomatoes is third with 2 billion, turnover. And if you look at, the gross value of other vegetables, outside of, potato, onion, and tomato, they account for 4 billion. Next. I believe colleagues that have presented before me, have already covered, these stats, that there's about, I think 19, in total in terms of the number of national fresh produce market that are, in operation, in the country. They play a very critical role, in as far as, ensuring food security, in the country, but also in terms of, making or providing market access, for, the producers, regardless of scale. They act as a platform for price recovery. They provide market certainty in the industry, but also they play a critical role in terms of value addition. You're talking here the cold storage facilities, the banana ripening facilities, the repacking, of produce so that they can be ready, for sale in retailers for household consumption, but also most critically in terms of, providing employment opportunities for the citizens of the country. Next. In terms of marketing of vegetables, there are strict rules and criterion that producers must adhere to. And key amongst this is to ensure that your produce comply, to the standards. And the standards include, amongst others, making sure that your product, when it's brought to the market, that is fresh, it's firm, it's free from serious injuries. Also that is free from decay, so that you don't sell people produce that is not safe for consumption. Also, it's key that the product that you supply to the market is free from insect infestation or foreign matter, and also that is fairly uniform, in terms of quality and the evenness, of ripeness, the color, the sizing, if you want your product to really, fetch, a fair price, at the market. But also to ensure that it complies, with the grading requirements as set out, by the Agriculture, Marketing, Acts. Next. Also, to ensure that the product, when it's brought to the market, is packed in clean and suitable packaging containers, so that the product can be protected, from, posing, risk, to the consumers ultimately. And that there's proper marking on the packaging, so that there can be a traceability in the case of food scare, but also to ensure that your product complies with the mass requirements, or that it's filled to acceptable capacity, to make sure that you do not send bags of products or of chilies, for instance, and mark it as 7 kg when you know that you basically packed 6.5. That's food fraud, and I think that should be discouraged. But also to make sure that the producer uses pesticides that complies with the prescribed maximum residue of the Foodstuffs and Cosmetics Act. Thanks. Next. In terms of utilizing, the channel, I always preach whenever I get the opportunity to say that, it is the safest, channel, in the country that the farmer can basically, opt, to use to sell, their product. In that, in the channel, there's market agents, you know, whose activities are highly regulated, you know, by APEC, as Francois has just, you know, indicated in his previous, you know, presentation. And then these market agents, they play a critical role of being middlemen. You know, they serve the interest of both the farmer and the buyer, in that, you know, they basically want to retain, you know, the royalty, you know, of both, selling, you know, the product at a price that is acceptable to the buyer, but the price that, you know, the buyer basically, you know, deem it, you know, to be fair, so that they can also go and, you know, on-sell it, you know, to the consumer. So they play a very, you know, delicate role. And for their services, you know, they take up to 7.5%, you know, commission, you know, out of the total, you know, value of the commodities that they are able to sell. And of course, you know, the 7.5 or the 12.5% or the cost of the produce is basically, you know, negotiable when the buyer visits the floor to buy, you know, the produce. Next. As I've indicated, you know, that the activities of the commission market agents, you know, are highly regulated by the Agriculture Produce Agents Council, as you know, Francois has just basically, you know, shared with you. So I'm not going to go into detail in terms of, you know, what they do, because I want to believe that, you know, this was covered quite extensively by the previous speaker. Thanks. Next. Next one, please. And the next slide. Can you skip? Yeah. In terms of benefits, it's key. The previous slide, please. Going too fast. The previous one. Yeah. It's important to note that you know, the NFPM channel has been in existence in South Africa for over, you know, 5, you know, decades. The next slide, please. There were, yeah, no, the next one. The next slide, please. The next one. I think the machine is hanging. I think in terms of benefits, yeah, this one. It's key to note that, you know, this channel has been in existence for over, you know, 5, you know, decades. And then the point that I also, you know, prefer to emphasize is that, you know, in those 5 decades, you know, the channel has not seen any price increase. That indeed, you know, the farmer only parts with about 12.5% of commission, you know, in terms of what is sold, you know, on the market. I can't think of any channel, you know, in the country that can basically, you know, guarantee, you know, that type of benefits. But also it provides a fair market price, you know, and here we're talking of a fluid and transparent, you know, price, you know, setting mechanism, in that the price that you pay for tomatoes today, indeed the price that you pay for tomatoes at 5 o'clock in the morning when the market opens, is not necessarily the same price that you'll pay, say, for instance, at, you know, 8 o'clock, if you were to get to the market 8 o'clock. The price fluctuates depending on the market forces of supply, you know, and demand. But also that, you know, the system is trusted, you know, it's been operating this way for many, you know, decades, you know, providing opportunity, you know, whereby, you know, there's consignment control when the product enters the facility of the National Fresh Produce Market. You know, there's stock balancing, you know, there's a tracking of the movement of stock when it enters the facility, including when it's in the cold storage facility, when the product is being ripened, up through, you know, the buyer's history, you know, the farmer's history, you know, statutory, you know, levies. All this information, you know, is captured, you know, in the fresh produce, you know, market, you know, system, so that, you know, as and when this information, you know, is required, you know, it can be made, you know, available. And this is key to make sure that, you know, people that are utilizing the channel, you know, have a peace of mind in terms of what the channel, you know, can provide. but also it provides a very efficient and reliable, payment, system. We know that according to the APEC rule, the farmer is supposed to receive payment, I think, within 5 to 7 days. But the reality is that a farmer can receive payment, daily, as and when his product, it is sold, and that this system, there's a trust account system that basically is monitored by APEC to make sure that there are no nefarious activities that basically short changes the farmer. Key also is to acknowledge and realize that it provides the shortest cash cycle for the farmer. I know that there are farmers that choose to engage in contract farming with retailers, and we know that they normally end up getting into agreements that are not favorable in terms of payment whereby farmers get paid in 90 days. Whereas with this particular system, farmers get to receive their cash within 5 to 7 working days. And the fact that these markets are located in urban areas where the bulk of consumption is, it basically helps to ensure a quicker rate of turnover of stock because of people in the urban areas. They are not engaged in farming, and they rely on what is made available conveniently for them to procure. So you end up having a situation whereby almost 99%, I think the last time I checked, of produce that are channeled through National Fresh Produce Market is sold, with only about less than 1% going into discard. Thanks. Next. Yeah, I think the other issue is that they've got a wider target market, in that you visit the markets at any given time. You'll come across wholesalers, you'll come across retailers, you'll come across buyers that are buying for export market, you'll come across informal traders, all basically having the same opportunity to access the widest of fresh produce that National Fresh Produce Market channel is able to provide. I've already touched on the fact that the markets are highly regulated through APEC to make sure that the activities are above board. Thanks. Just in terms of market trends, we may have noticed that there's a growing demand for food, mainly as a result of increasing levels of health consciousness amongst others, but also in terms of population growth. And all these things basically they project well for the industry, because people are continually looking for vitamins, for proteins, and vegetables can basically provide natural those health matters that people are looking for to be able to have a proper functioning bodies and metabolism. So that basically portends well for the industry. Next, please. About us, we are the Council for the Black Market Agents. We exist, to see economically that we have a socially inclusive, national fresh produce market that contributes equitably, to the success, of the industry. But also, we exist, in terms of our mission to promote the inclusion of Black industry role players, to ensure that they are adequately capacitated in all forms and that they are enabled to compete freely in the market. And I think some of the issues that were raised by my colleague there, Andrew Young, are some of the key challenges that we are facing, in the industry in terms of floor space allocated to Black market agents on the trade floor, but then continually, struggling to have access to fresh produce, at least have continuity in terms of, supply of produce, so that, we can be able to transform, the trade flow so that it can reflect the country's demographics. It remains a challenge, and I think it's one that needs to be given, proper attention. And as a result, we very much welcome the investigation by the Competition Authority, because they seek to want to get to the bottom of the challenge to see, what are the factors that are constraining transformation, at national fresh produce market, but also in the industry as a whole. We have made submission to them in terms of what we believe are the constraining, factors, and we look forward to make, oral presentation as well, to engage with them and see, if we are not able to come up with amicable, means or solutions, to address the issue of transformation and ensure that, everyone, benefit equitably in the sector. Because as it is, there's little by way of, benefit, in the 20.9 billion that we see in the sector. Participation benefits, by black farmers, by black market agents, is less than 1%, of that 20.9 billion. So we are saying that, it cannot be that some 30 years into our democracy, we are still grappling with this type of challenges. It's about time that, we find means to address, these issues and make sure that, we're able, to move forth as a country, making sure that, everyone is able to benefit equitably in this particular, sector. Thank you. I think that's about it. And the next slide is just my contact, details for those that may want to engage, with us further. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas Mawasha, for the presentation. I'm now going to open the floor for any questions. I was hoping that the share percentage from Black producers would be higher, since in the previous presentation, Mr. Knowles indicated that there has been a shift away from the large producers to the fresh produce market. Do we have any questions, any reactions to the presentation that was given by Mr. Mawash? All right. We are going to move to the next presentation. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Mawash. We are going to move to the next presentation that is going to be given to us from the Fruit SA, which is going to be covering the market access and recent developments in international trade. The presentation is going to be given by Ms. Fumelani Rachitanga from Fruit SA. Ma'am, are you ready?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm ready. I'm just, I don't know, I'm not so conversant with Teams, sorry. Maybe I should just email my presentation, or I can be directed as to how I share the screen. Just share the window. Okay. Can you see the presentation?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Slide moved. Good morning once again, everyone, and Chair, and thanks for the invitation. This will be my presentation. The first part of the presentation is just an introduction about who Fruit South Africa is. We are an umbrella body for the different fruit industry associations. So in my presentation, when I refer to fruit, it will only be the fruit that are, the focus of the members of Fruit South Africa. The first one being Berries South Africa, mainly representing the blueberry, raspberries, and the blackberry growers. And then we have the Fresh Produce Exporters Forum, who are mainly representing export agents. And then we have Hotgrow, who represent the palm and stone fruit industries. And then we have the South African Subtropical Growers Association, who manages the affairs of the avocado, mango, and lychee growers. associations, and then we have the South African table grape industry. So we do not deal with wine grapes, we only deal with the fresh table grapes. So that's why we have started there. And then we have the Citrus Growers Association of Southern Africa. You might be wondering why Southern Africa. CGA in their membership also have producers from Zimbabwe, Botswana, Eswatini, and Namibia. That's why there's the Southern African part, so in addition to South Africa. So just a little about us again, our vision is that we strive for a competitive, equitable, and sustainable South African fruit industry. And then our mission is to represent our members in providing advocacy, collaboration, coordination, and services on key industry-related matters. So what are our objectives as Fruit South Africa? We exist to maintain Fruit South Africa, or we seek to maintain Fruit South Africa as the collective platform for the SA fruit industry. And then the second one is to engage constructively with government and other strategic stakeholders on policy, legislation, and other fruit industry matters. And the third one is to promote transformation through coordination of BEE, skills development, and training. And the fourth one is to collate and communicate key industry-related information to the broader public and industry stakeholders. And lastly, to provide a platform for electronic certification. In terms of our work, like day-to-day focus, we focus on 5 priority areas, which is transformation, market access, government and stakeholder relations, logistics and infrastructure, and information management and communication. On transformation, just to preempt any questions that may come later on after the presentation, at the Fruit SA level, we don't implement transformation initiatives. Our members have dedicated capacity looking at transformation in their respective industries. So at the Fruit SA level, our focus is more on the monitoring of the implementation of the fruit industry transformation strategy and visibility, or providing visibility of the fruit industry wide transformation initiatives beyond the fruit industry itself. Just a snapshot of the fruit industry itself. The industry is valued at more than 60 billion South African rand. And the figures that I'm going to present are based on the 2020-21 season. We are still in the process of collating the 21-22 season. So in that period, we had just over 200 hectares, which were under fruit production. And from those hectares, we produced 5.6 million tons of fruit. And then in terms of market distribution, you will see the fruit industry in South Africa is export-oriented. So we exported 65% of fresh fruit. And then when I'm talking fruit, I'll just need to qualify that our focus is fresh fruit. So we exported 65% of fresh fruit to more than 100 countries globally. And then 11% was sold on the local market, while the remaining 24% was processed. And then in the processing figure there, or percentage, we have 1% which relates to drying. So the fruit industry is one of the biggest subsectors in the total agricultural industry in South Africa, contributing about 28% to the total agri-GDP of the country. And our exports, the fruit industry rather, accounts for about 35% of the country's agricultural exports. So those exports make up about 35% of total exports from the country. And then we are also one of the biggest employers, looking at the fact that the industry is not really mechanized, particularly, when it comes to harvesting. You can mechanize certain aspects of the production chain, but most of it is still manual. So there is very labor intensivity in the fruit industry. We employ over 290,000. These are people directly on the farms, and the figure does not include those employed downstream and upstream the chain. So colleagues may well be aware of the fruit growing regions in South Africa. We are blessed with a wide climatic environment, and then we're able to produce fruit in every province in the country, depending on the climate, with the Western Cape being the biggest producer. And then in terms of markets, export markets, the EU is currently the largest export market for our fruit. So it is a critical market for us. And then the Asian market is also growing, taking about 19.5% of our fruit, followed by the Middle East, UK, Russia, the rest of the African continent, and then North America. So coming to the meat of the presentation, I will not dwell on what the recent developments are. So I'm just going to project or present what that means for us, or what the impact of those developments have been to us in terms of market access. We are all aware, and then previous speakers have also alluded to the developments that have been playing out in the recent past. I mean, things to do with the COVID pandemic, because the effects of that were still felt even after the outbreak of the pandemic. The issues to do with rising costs emanating from the COVID situation, and the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and then also protectionism, which we are seeing in the world globally these days. Countries tend to be closing up or closing in. And then locally, we also have seen a number of developments, the social unrest that we had in July of 2021, issues to do with poor service delivery, labor strikes or industrial action, and then deterioration in public infrastructure when you look at roads, rail, and ports. So I deliberately did not put a slide on that. Coming to what these points to us is that market access is critical for the SA fruit industry. As you saw from my figures there, we export 65%. So this is the largest uptake or channel for our fruit. And then again, while we export this fruit, we face a very competitive environment, although we are able to compete somehow, but there are limitations, and it could have been better. We see that in the Far East in particular, we do not have, or South Africa does not have, free trade agreements or preferential trade agreements relative to our competitors, from the Southern Hemisphere, and then resulting in issues, where we see tariffs as high as 30% for some fruit in countries such as India, South Korea, and Thailand. So this puts us at a back foot compared to our competitors there. And then in our traditional markets like the EU, we are seeing stricter import regulations. A recent example is the issue with the Orange Protocol, or the Orange trade regime, where the EU requires that fruit be kept at 2 degrees Celsius for 25 days. And this adds costs to growers at the end. And then these growers are already under enormous financial pressures. And then we are also seeing a rise in sustainability requirements. A previous speaker also alluded to the EU Green Deal. This will also add, to the costs when it comes to exporting. Of course, producers or those who are in the business of, trading will find ways of dealing with this, but it does not negate the added burden that they have to, to deal with. Multiple and ever-increasing compliance requirements. And then we know that these costs are counterproductive for growers, who I mentioned earlier are already experiencing a growing financial burden. And at the end of the day, they also receive the least financial gains in the value chain. And then we see that small or emerging growers are worst affected. We also actually undertook a study that looked at this. And then the focus was just on the social and environmental standards. It was not on food safety and others. And then we continue to see, maybe before I move on to the next one, we are not anti, compliance. We are pro-compliance, but the issue is that let's look at ways that will not continuously, put the grower at a disadvantage and further squeeze their margin and compromise their sustainability. And then we are also seeing continuous differentiation of compliance regulations, which again extends to greater costs for producers. And then when it comes to the Far East, it's not all the fruit types that currently have access to those markets. It's only a few commodities that can export to certain markets, particularly those that have phytosanitary requirements or where you need to comply with certain protocols before you can export or access them. We're currently sitting with actually 13 applications at the moment to about 8 countries in the Far East. So in the Far East, so it's 7 in the Far East, apologies, and then the US as well. We also have some applications. And then these negotiations are protracted. I mean, as you may be aware, it took about 12 years for citrus to be shipped, or between the citrus protocol, rather, to be finalized in the Philippines for South Africa to be able to ship citrus. So if this process takes this long, and then we have this long list, because everybody wants access to those markets, we may not even see access, or markets opening in those localities in our lifetime if these processes take this long to be concluded. And then we saw that the COVID-19 travel restrictions also impacted on progress, because as part of the negotiations or the application processes or processing, the country that we're applying for access to needs to also come to South Africa and do what they call verification visits for those who may not be familiar with the processes. So people could not travel during COVID. So we lost seasons and then we are now recovering, but this again, is also happening slowly. And then another issue that exacerbates this is that most of these countries only process one product at a time. So they cannot do, or they do not do two applications, the processing of 2 applications concurrently. So what we want to push for, or what we always advocate for, is that we need to push for concurrent processing of market access applications so that it speeds up, the processes. And we've also seen, I mean, due to COVID and the Russia-Ukraine conflict, massive cost increases across the value chain. I understand for diesel, this was last year's figures, the increases were up to 25%, and packing material up to 22%, and then fertilizer to 80%. So these are high figures or high percentages in terms of increases. But we've also seen, or recently, that shipping charges, which went very high, during COVID, these are starting to decrease to pre-COVID levels, and hopefully they will normalize soon. And then the issues to do with the ESCOM and energy challenges, which other speakers have also alluded to. I mean, there are high energy demands, and then these result in high costs, and then load shedding, it also makes it challenging to maintain irrigation schedules and cold chain requirements. And then it also negatively impacts production and supply of certain packaging types. I mean, this was an issue in the past season as well. And then it also makes meeting cold storage treatments demands for various markets expensive and difficult. Because, I mean, for instance, if you need to reach 2% or to your fruit to reach 2%, and then you're experiencing load shedding, that obviously will compromise or will make it difficult for you to comply. Then it means you need to use more additional resources for additional energy generation to be able to comply with those protocols. And this can have dire consequences if we can't reach those required temperatures. We risk losing our markets because we cannot comply with the protocols. And then coming back home again, we've seen shipping delays as well. We all know the issues around, the ports. Also, I mean, I remember last year when the Transnet strike was just starting, it was at the peak of the berry season, and then blueberries. And then that is a very highly perishable, commodity. So these things can also result in quality issues when staff or when consignments reach the export destinations. Also further compromising our reputation as a reliable supplier of quality produce. And then last year, we also saw average to low prices at on the export markets. And then due to all these issues also in Europe, we saw a declining consumer purchasing power. You know, people are spending more on energy, and then the rising inflation also resulted in this. So at the end, growers did not make such good profits compared to previous season. And then we are saying that the industry is currently actually in distress because of all these issues that have built up over the past 2 seasons at least. So in conclusion, I would like to emphasize that market access is critical, not just to sustain the current status quo, but also for inclusive growth. If new entrants come in, what is the outlet for their fruits? So we need to work on this as a matter of agency. And it is not Fruit South Africa that opens up market. So this is a government responsibility, but working together, we need to accelerate opening up of new markets so that we don't sit with problems in our hands. I know from a consumer's side of things, it will be good if there's overproduction, but our role is to represent the producer. So we need to accelerate, the opening up of new markets and do whatever is possible to ensure that these processes happen as quickly as it is possible. We cannot afford to lose our existing markets. I mentioned the EU is an important market for us. So those markets where we already have access, let's continue to put all measures to ensure that we retain them and that we optimize the conditions for exports are also optimized so that we do not lose them into the future. As I mentioned, the issues that I highlighted here cannot be dealt with by only one party. So government and industry need to work together to address the gaps and maximize opportunities that are there. And I think we've spent so much time and effort in coming up with the AMP. So let us use that as one of the vehicles to drive this going forward for the benefit of everyone in the country. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Ms. Rachitanga, for that presentation covering the market access in the fruit industry. Now I'm going to open the floor for reactions to the presentation. I see that Ms. Foster has posed a question on the chat bar. Would you like to verbalize your question? I see also there's another one from Vuka. You are most welcome to take the floor, or I will read the question.
Thank you very much. Yes, and thank you for the presentation. I would like to pick up on the fact that the industry associations would do a lot of the work, if I can put it that way, and that Fruit South Africa would monitor the progress. How is market access and traceability from smallholder farmers in particular, or producer groups, to local markets? How is that progressing? How is that monitored? And then following on from that, if we have a look at the phytosanitary impact of things like citrus black spot, let's just take the citrus, false codling moth, how are smallholders and informal sector, local market producers advised of the risks and, if you like, trained in what to watch for, who to alert, and so on, so that they have an understanding of what the export requirements are, and they are able to address issues early, because a lot of these could be amongst the big farm orchards and so on. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And let me read the question from Vuka. How is the value chain of Fruit SA from farm gate to the export market in terms of storage facilities? Over to you, ma'am, for responding to the questions.
Okay, thank you, and thank you for the questions. I'm not sure I quite get the last question of how the fruit essay, the value chain of fruit essay from farm gate to export market in terms of storage facilities. Maybe the person who asked it can just verbalize. I'm not quite sure that I understand it. And in terms of who advises small producers, as I indicated in my presentation, we have our members who have transformation initiatives. So under that, they also work with growers, the smaller growers or emerging growers within their respective industries to prepare them for market readiness. So such kinds of programs that they have will then be used to alert the small growers on what the requirements are and what needs to be done. And then in terms of fruit essay monitoring, traceability and market access from farm level to local markets, we are not involved in that. But for export markets, I think those who export get audited by independent auditors, but at the fruit essay level, we don't have a monitoring role on that. Our monitoring is just on the implementation of transformation initiatives, not on the actual business operations on the farm.
Right, thank you for that response. Let me take the last hand from Ms. Yolanda.
Good day, everybody. I just want to add from what Fumo was saying. I am from the Citrus Growers Association Grower Development Company, which is an arm dealing with the Black growers throughout the country. We have units that deal with skills transfer and technical support for the small grower across the country. We do this in various ways. We also have study groups that are regional in their nature, where we provide this technical support to the growers so that they can have an understanding of the growth of how they need to grow and also the prevention of the diseases. So across the country, because we have citrus across 8 provinces in South Africa, so across the country in regions, depending on how big the province is, in some regions we have about 3 sets of study groups where we have these farmers that where we provide this technical and production knowledge to. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Yolanda, for adding that. So now I don't know if there is anything else, even on the chat bar. Let me check. So something. Right, we didn't get clarity on that question from Vuka. Ms. Gwen commented, thank you. The lack of understanding of market requirements is a major barrier to accessing markets. All right. Thank you, colleagues, for those questions and adding on the responses. And now we are going to move, if there is nothing else, this is the final chance for discussions before we move to our last presentation, which is going to be concluding remarks from our colleague at the NAMC. Don't know if there is anything else before we can close the platform. All right. Sis Nonhlanhla, are you online? Katu, am I audible, colleagues?
Yes, you are audible.
Yes, we can hear you, Madam Chairperson.
All right. Do we have Ms. Kwamanda on the platform? All right. In the absence of having Ms. Kwamanda, I'm going to give it again to Mr. Elvis Nakane to give us closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson, for the sterling work done in terms of directing this program for the session today. Indeed, it wasn't an easy one because some of the presenters and or speakers that had earlier confirmed indeed could not join us to come and present the information that we had requested them to come and share with the stakeholders here today, specifically the representatives from IMASA. We will endeavor to ensure that next time when there is something like this, we get them to come and present. But overall, from the NAMC side, I think this was a good initiative. It's always better when initiatives like this are done on a continuous basis, so that we do not lose momentum, and we endeavor to ensure that we cover as broad as possible the critical topics that might be necessary, especially as we seek to ensure that we broaden market access for especially smallholder and emerging producers in South Africa. At the end of it all, like the various other speakers have indicated, specifically the speaker from South Africa, we have this blueprint, which is the Agriculture and Agro-Processing Master Plan, and it is the responsibility for all of us to ensure that we play whatever part that we must play to ensure that we implement the various provisions contained in the proposals that are presented in this particular master plan, and indeed for the benefit of all concerned. The master plan specifically talks about the envisaged outcome of increasing the share of black farmers in overall production to 20% by 2030 to stimulate meaningful transformation within the country. And this, indeed, colleagues, you will agree with me that it is going to stay with us for a long time because it is the imperative. It is quite imperative for the country to really move towards a transformed and inclusive agricultural sector that really underpins this inclusive growth that all of us seeks to see happening in the short, medium, and long term. Without going further into the details regarding what was shared today, let me take this opportunity, colleagues, to thank all the speakers and our presenters, as well as your respective organizations for making time once again to come and share your expertise as well as your knowledge. And as far as the various aspects relating to the marketing of fresh produce in South Africa is concerned. Speakers from the South African Union of Food Markets, the Council for Black Market Agents, the regulator, the APEC, from South Africa, as well as the NAMC. Please do so even tomorrow when we invite you on other aspects regarding our programs. Please avail yourself and all your representatives so that we can continue in this quest to share this critical information with our intended stakeholders, which are the farmers themselves. From the NAMC, we will continue to provide these platforms, excuse me, so that we continuously bring to the fore the kind of information that needs to be shared amongst all the stakeholders. As indicated by Madam Chairperson, all the presentations with the, of course, the permission of all the presenters will be shared with all that attended, even those that did not attend, but are on our database. They will receive the presentations that were made here today, colleagues. Once again, thank you very much to you, Madam Chairperson. That's the long and the short of it from us as the NAMC. Thank you. Lastly, before I give back to you, Madam Program Director, the organizing team, please pardon me, I almost forgot you. The organizing team led by Mr. Myeki, as well as Mr. Rambau, you did an excellent job. We really appreciate all your efforts. Please keep it up and continue ensuring that we continue to have successful events going forward. Thank you to the team. Back to you, Madam Program Director.
Thank you so much, Mr. Nakane. We have all been thanked, colleagues. And there's a question regarding how do I engage in the discussions about implementing the AAMP. You can reach out to the NAMC, to Mr. Elvis Nakane, Mr. Bonani Nyodo, Dr. Sifiso Ntombela, or myself. The NAMC is the lead implementer of the AMP, so we can channel the communication to the right person within us. Thank you so much, colleagues, and the meeting has been adjourned. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.